Well, that thing was going to completely loop on us. Ladies and gentlemen, variations thereof, welcome to the Selectives Lorecast, a casual Elder Scrolls podcast. There are people walking in the background right now. My name is Rotten Deadite. Today we're talking about the Khajiit culture, and such like. With me today are...
This one is James, also known as Aramithius.
This one is Scourgicus, though you may know him as Moon Sugar Leader or by his true name as Michael.
And I am Andrew, also known as Dwight Guar.
And we've been trying to do this cast for a minute.
Yeah.
That's true.
Finally, we get this thing going. We're talking about Khajiit culture today, but we're generally just going to discuss pretty much the whole, barrel of cats anyhow. I think it's probably safe to say that of all the non-humanoid races, of which I guess we're only talking about a couple, but possibly even including the humanoid races, the Khajiit are probably one of the most popular races for players to play in the Elder Scrolls games. They've just got a very attractive culture. People really enjoy the idea of, playing... the idea of playing a race that's constantly being accused of stealing things.
Thieves are a popular archetype to play in games.
Well, I can't imagine why. They're the main character in every Elder Scrolls game. This is, of course, an unfair characterization. Khajiit is not guilty of these crimes. But there's actually a hell of a lot to Khajiit culture, and not just from stuff that just happened in ESO. They've actually had a very well-written and well-rounded out bit of lore for a very long time. So this is not going to be a difficult cast, but just in case, we got Moon Sugar Leader, who I would definitely consider to be the expert in Khajiit culture, to show up for this cast. And Michael, I'm going to ask you to start up this conversation. Where do you think we should start talking about where Khajiit come from?
Okay, so we'll start with the most difficult question. No,
It's easy.
Right, so the Khajiit are the feline peoples of Elsewhere. And Elsewhere is in the south of Tamriel, south of Cyrodiil, and east of Valenwood. In the north, you have a region called Anaquina, which is a red desert. In the south, you have a jungle area known as Palatine, and together, it's known as the Nation of Elsewhere. So so this is kind of an aside to the rest of you guys. So of course we have the ridiculous amount of notes that I have. Did you just want to start at the top and work our way down? Because I know that the hugest section is on Khajiit philosophy, but we got sections on history as well. So I don't know where you want to start.
I think history is a good place to start. How did Khajiit come about? What's their creation origin story?
Oh, good Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll start with Khajiit philosophy then. All right, so the thing about the Khajiit is that they have... Well, let me put it this way. Okay, so let me get the intro stuff out of the way. Okay, feline peoples of Elsewhere, Anaqueen and Palatine. One of the weird things about the Khajiit is that they have 16 fur stocks, and that means that within their race or species, there are 16 variations. You have... for example, the Ohms, who basically look like wood elves with a very light coat of fur, and they differentiate themselves from wood elves by facial tattoos. Everything from that all the way up to the Cent Rot, which is basically a saber-toothed tiger the size of an Indian elephant, and all kinds of stuff in between. Really, really wild. They worship the moons, and they also worship, to some degree, Aedra and Daedra, but a lot of their faith resides or deals with the moons. They harvest and partake in moon sugar, which is a sugar cane that grows mostly in Elsewhere. In ESO you saw that there was a guy in Morrowind who was able to get it to grow. Mostly it's in Elsewhere. It can be used to make the extremely addictive narcotic skooma, but moon sugar itself has massive religious significance. Uh, and the Khajiit have a very unique perspective on the Arbus and Tamrielic life. Um, Humans and elves generally see the nature of the Arbus in terms of conflict, right? Uh, this is especially true of the Manish races, except for the Red Guards. Red Guards are different, and the Elven races. Uh, there, you find a lot of emphasis on mimetic doubles in Manish and Elven theologies. That being focuses on like the conflict between Anu and Padme, Anuiel and Sithis, Akatosh and Lorkhan. But the Khajiit do not see the universe in this way. They see it in terms of love. And their first pair is not brothers who are in an argument over who's going to get the girl. It's in fact a married couple, Anur and his wife Fadomai. So the Khajiit creation myth is found in the in-game book Words of Clan Mother Anisi to her favored daughter. Ostensibly, this book is instructions on being a clan mother and about the importance of secrets, but it's couched within the Khajiit creation myth. And there is a ton of information that we can glean from this to determine what it is the Khajiit think about the Arbus and each other and all the other races. And so that's what I would like to do today, if everybody's okay with that. Okay, so it all starts off then with, in the beginning, there were two littermates, Anur and Fadomai. After many phases, Fadomai said to Anur, "Let us wed and make children to share our happiness." So this right here is the difference. It's not two brothers who are entering the void to try to make something out of it. It's two lovers who wish to share their joy. Love expands beyond the lovers themselves, and it's something that's meant to be shared. It becomes a community. I would argue that this is similar to the Christian theology of perichoresis. This is an idea that's especially popular in Eastern Orthodoxy, and it's the idea that the Trinity is most understood or best understood as a relationship of love, or the divine dance, if you will, and that love extends beyond the Trinity to all of creation, and that the call is for all of creation to join the dance. And so I think that that's kind of where they're going with this idea. So the other thing to note here is that for the Khajiit, all people are one litter. It's all one family. We see this in that the children of Anur and Fadomai include both the Aedra and the Daedra. Now they're in separate litters. You know, the one litter is mostly Aedric, the other is mostly Daedric, and the third litter is, well, that one's kind of weird, but it's all one family.
Yeah,
they have the same
oddballs.
parents. What's that?
It's the third one is the oddballs almost. It's not. The third one is Locage, and I want to say someone. Is it Nirn at the same time?
Yeah,
Or...
and Joan and Jode and
Yeah.
Zora.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's the ones that where the difference is between Khajiit and everyone else. Is the third litter is the litter that defines the Khajiit almost.
Definitely. One of the interesting things too, and one, there's no real sundering of et ada in the Khajiit mythos. You know, in Manish and Murish theologies, you'll see that, you know, the Aedra were the ones who are like, yeah, we want to make the world, and the Daedra are like, you are an idiot, and that's not the way it happens in the Khajiit mythos, and that's really different. So the way I kind of put it is that Aedra and Daedra, from the Khajiit perspective, are all one family, even if some have chosen to walk another way. So I think one of the really interesting ways to understand the Khajiit view of the divine is by looking at how they view Mehrunes Dagon. Okay. Of course, we know Mehrunes Dagon, the big bad from Oblivion, as the Daedra whose sphere is destruction. He's really bad. He appears in the 7 fights of the Aldudaga. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, as the Leaper Demon King, and Alduin steals his ability to leap and says, "I'll give it back to you if you take all this stuff that you've been stealing from the Kalpas, so I don't eat it. If you bring it all back and destroy it, then I'll give you your leap back." It's very tragic. The Khajiit don't see him that way. For the Khajiit, Mehrunes is a kitten, and maybe the archetypal kitten. Fadomai says, "Mehrunes, you are the Ja Khajiit," that's kitten, or child, "for what is more destructive than a kitten?" Now, I can speak to this personally. My wife and I do animal rescue, and we have had a lot of bottle babies. Some who are a day old, right? They still have the umbilical cords and everything. And their claws are sharp. I mean, you may have seen the meme that says about, make an adorable fluff ball and they give it razor claws. They really are. And between the claws and the biting, the issue really is that they haven't learned their movements yet. And they haven't learned that their movements can hurt others. They destroy things because they lack fine motor control. Now, over time, cats become much gentler, even graceful, but in the beginning, they're extremely destructive. Mehrunes, then, is destructive because he is a kitten. His destructiveness can be mourned, even corrected, but not punished, because he literally can't be any other way. Which is, I think, probably a pretty unique view on Mehrunes Dagon.
Well, I don't know. I think a lot of that's kind of how a lot of the Daedra are described as being incapable of being anything other than what they are, but also really happy doing it. So,
well, that's a fair point. Yeah.
And if I can vaguely butt in on the Dunmurray specifics, he gets within the House of Troubles, he gets equated with the terrain of Vardenfell. He gets equated with natural disasters and that sort of thing.
Right.
So he's not. It's almost not willful destruction. It's just destruction that just happens.
Yeah. It's got to happen. Yeah.
It can't be any other way. So maybe Mehrunes Dagon has been missold somewhere along the line to to the Manish races at the very least.
Yeah.
Possibly the Mer as well, but then the Khajiit showed that up quite nicely.
Yeah. So for extra credit, and I'm not saying for us to do this. This is for those of you who are watching. God bless you. For extra credit, go and think about Mehrunes as the Jungian archetype of the child, and then come back and talk. Yeah, I think that's just good fun. Okay, so
there's no. That's really actually interesting because Buckney Bros and I were just talking about the concept of the moon axle and its relationship to the lunar lattice, and and even more interesting, I think, the idea of what Jung called the ego-self axis and the separation of the ego from the self, which for children, the ego and the self are the same thing.
Right.
Yeah. And that pretty accurately describes Mehrunes Dagon as well. So it's all coming together, baby.
That's right.
Is there any indication then that the Khajiit think that Mehrunes may grow up? I don't think we've seen enough of their unique perspective, but kittens grow up. So
I haven't run across anything that would suggest that, but that would make sense from their perspective.
Yeah, one of the reasons why people tolerate the behavior of children is because they know they'll eventually stop.
Right.
But you're not going to get that with Mehrunes Dagon. If anything, Mehrunes Dagon is more like Donald Trump, but let's not get into that today.
Yeah. Unless going back to the 7 fights, all the pieces come back together and he becomes the Leaper Demon King again. But that's not a Khajiit myth, so we probably shouldn't dwell on that.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
That's Nordic. Yeah.
There's actually, and I know that we talked about all this stuff before, but there's a lot in dealing with Daedra that kind of their ontos, their way of being, is very different from, say, humans or elves or anybody else, and it can get a little tricky. You can't blame Mehrunes Dagon, but I kind of feel like you can blame Molag Bal. There's there is something intentionally evil going on there, and Molag Bal doesn't appear by name in the Khajiit creation myth, but I think it's the second litter. It says that there were these who were born and many others. So he's in there, but he's just not talked about specifically.
Yeah. Can I just pick up on a bit of etymology? You said that before we let go of Dagon, you said that it's his title is the Khajiit.
Yeah.
But how does that relate to the J?
That's different.
How?
What's the different? What's the similarity in the meaning, and why the crossover between the words is what I'm getting at.
Okay, so you would need somebody from the Tagra project to go into this fully, but I know that, of course, Kaj is desert. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and the each part Khajiit is those who walk, so the desert walkers.
Right.
So Ja would just be little, or
Yeah.
little
Okay,
sandwalkers.
Yeah.
And somebody's typing something.
Yeah.
And
Sorry.
Ja Khajiit is something different completely, and for that you would need an expert in the language.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, Amrare Tosharak has said just Ja is young or child, so yeah, same thing. But I did prod Tagra before the cast, but I'm not sure we've got anyone.
Well, the Elsewhere team is actually having a team meeting right now, so sadly, I don't think we'll be able to get them.
Okay. But
And the Tagra folks are very busy. God bless them. They have so much to work to do.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, moving on. So that's the case study of Mehrunes. So there is this similarity that in between the Khajiit and everybody else, that something goes wrong in this initial relationship, and in this case, it's the breaking of the family. Nissi tells us, and Anur said, that's the dad, 2 litters is enough, for too many children will steal our happiness. Remember that originally the idea was to share their happiness. Now he's saying that too many children will steal their happiness. This is the first occurrence that we see of discord between the two of them. It is a zero-sum view of love. That is, that there's only so much to go around, and that too many children will diminish the amount of happiness and joy that the family can experience. I don't know if this is a reference to father's jealousy. This is the thing that is often experienced in hetero couples, where when the mom has had a baby, of course she's spending a great deal of time with the baby because babies are pretty helpless, and fathers can sometimes feel very left out. Maybe it's a reference to that, I don't know, but it is definitely the first misstep in the dance. And after this, there start to be a lot more. Shortly thereafter, Kanarthi talks about being lonely, so Fadomai tricks Anur into making her pregnant again. And from that litter, we get Joan and Jode, Nirni, Azura, and later, Lorkaj. Now, there's an interesting bit in Nissi that says, and from the beginning, Nirni and Azura fought for their mother's favor. Now, maybe this is because love is seen as a zero-sum a la Anur, and hence rivalry, that this idea of the zero-sum of love is somehow filtering down to the kids. So this... Hold on, I've got to read this for a second. Okay, so in the traditional view of the Arbus, conflict is it's practically the Nimic, because it begins with the first. But sibling rivalry for the Khajiit didn't begin with Anur and Fadomai, though maybe the roots of it come from Anur. Thus conflict and sibling rivalry are not the Nimic of the Arbus, but with the children following or imitating Anur's philosophy. I don't know. Does that make sense? Is that a little weird?
Yeah,
it's all a little weird. I'm just glad
I had a note from against the kind of the idea of the philosophy of zero sum. I kind of see that. I know that you kind of pitched the beast races and the Khajiit in particular as being the kind of the third option, the synthesis to thesis and antithesis of,
Yes.
of man and mer. It kind of feels almost like that, like the Khajiit are the first to introduce that. If you're talking, the zero sum is kind of the opposite thinking of that. If someone's having an argument, you have a winner and you have a loser.
Yeah.
And that's the zero sum thing. That's totally not synthesis.
Right.
So I was just wondering if you thought that whether the zero sum being the bad thing, that the Khajiit were Fadomai's attempt at a synthesis, in order to make everything better and reconcile the children. I think now I say that out loud, that's almost the way it's put in the book itself, almost.
Yeah. As we go on further, it seems pretty clear to me that there is. I'm hesitant to use this term, but there's almost like a redemptive arc with the Khajiit, where they're trying to reconcile. Maybe that's the better word. They're trying to reconcile the conflict that just deepens and deepens throughout time, and that they are an attempt to solve that, or they are attempting to solve it.
Yeah, although I would say there is a slight degree of adversarialness in that particular narrative, that you have got the Khajiit inherently fighting with Nirn, that there's the ongoing conflict between the Khajiit and the world. I mean, that's, again, going back to what we were talking about with the Orc cast, maybe they're taking the role of the outcast as an outflowing of that. But it's an almost Moorish outlook, but not quite. In that you've got the world, you've got Nirn being this hot, scorching, terrible place that will try and kill you, and the Khajiit are in this place and trying to make the best of it. When I went through your notes in detail, I've got a scrawled note here of, if Nirn forgave Locage, does that mean that Khajiit are just trying to make Nirn into a good place, rather than the Locanic trying to move beyond, which is what the Dunmer are trying to do. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'll shut up.
That's okay. You're getting ahead of me.
Sorry.
I know. There's so much good stuff. You want to run to it. It's good.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the sibling rivalry. We have the third pregnancy of Fadomai, and this is where things go really bad. Anor caught Fadomai while she was still birthing, and he was angry. Anor struck Fadomai, and she fled to birth the last of her litter far away in the great darkness. Fadomai's children heard what had happened, and they all came to be with her and protect her from Anor's anger. Okay, so we can assume that Anor is angry because Fadomai deceived him. Now, it occurs to me, and I'm going to borrow a phrase from Joseph Campbell, that this situation signifies Anor's failure to take notice of details like the fact that his wife has gotten bigger and is pregnant. One would feel that this is something you wouldn't miss, but apparently he did. Failure to notice the details. But it gets pretty dark real quick. It goes to abuse, to flight, and the protection by the children, which has really disturbing parallels to real world stuff, but I'm not going to get into that. It is the breaking of the dance. The zero sum of love, which leads to deception, which had moved to deception and now to full-on violence. This is where things get a little weird, because they fled to the great darkness, which might be Oblivion, and that's where we got the birth of Lorcage. Before I get into that, I have an excursus on place, which I think is pretty important for the Khajiit. So the Khajiit story is weird because we don't know where it starts. We don't know where everything to this point took place. When Khenarthi is saying that she's lonely, it says that she's above the world, but it's not Nirn, because the planet Nirn had not been created yet. We can maybe think that this is Aetherius, but we don't know. Whatever place it is where they started, they left to go into the Great Darkness. We don't know, is that Oblivion? Is that the Scuttling Void? We're not sure. Later, Nirn would say that wherever it is, the Great Darkness that they are, is no place for children. So does that mean the Great Darkness is a place that is not a place? Or just not a good place for children? I'm not really sure. In any case, Nirn in the Khajiit mythos is a person. She's one of the daughters of Fadomai, but she becomes the world. When Lorkhaj creates the world, he says, Lorkhaj makes a place for children, and Lorkhaj puts you there so you can give birth. So Nirn becomes the planet Nirn, a living being with personality and emotions, but also a planet. So we may be seeing like kind of a Gaia reference going on here.
It was kind of interesting to me also that you were saying things about the darkness and the kind of confusion as to what that is. I kind of that felt very, very similar to me in terms of the hunger, in terms of looking at the Red Guards.
Right.
Again, looking at because it said that Lorkhaj was full of the great darkness,
Yes.
and Sep is full of hunger,
Yes.
as well. So you're possibly looking at something more metaphorical there. But the other thing that also got me was that the darkness is identified with Namira, and
Yes.
not nocturnal.
Which is really weird, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's because nocturnal is the Urdra, is the primordial darkness, and all the rest of it. And why on earth does she not get a shout out for it?
And this is one of my big questions, which I'm hoping if we ever get a Khajiit DLC, we'll find an answer to it. You know, as I'm going through all this, I just finished up the Somerset DLC, which of course has a lot of stuff on Nocturnal, and I'm like, why do we not see Nocturnal more in Khajiit stuff? Because she's almost completely absent.
Yeah.
And
Although
I'm not sure why. I mean, you would think, because she kind of, you know, she's got this whole thing with thieves going on, and Khajiit are stereotypically, you know, the thieves of whatever. But no, it's, if anything, it's Namira.
yeah, I'm just trying to thinking back to the kind of the third moon, for Khajiit as well. They identify that with Lorkhaj and is that identified with Lorkhaj's corpse?
We'll get to that.
Yeah, which
Gonna
is
make a lot of people mad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll work on that. But I just want to make the thought here of if you are thinking about Lorkhaj's corpses decay,
Right.
which is straight up Namira.
Yes.
So maybe that's something to do with that. And if you go back to the metaphor of how the family works and the breakdown, that's the decay of the relationship, if you like.
Right.
So maybe Namira as entropy as being bad is the thing here. I don't know whether the Khajiit are particularly trying. Yeah, sorry, Deadites literally typed that in. But I'm not sure whether that's that still feels a little tenuous to me. Sorry, I'll stop burbling.
That's okay. That's okay. There's plenty to talk about there, and let's come down to it. So, the next thing Onissi tells us, and Fadomai gave birth to Lorkhaj, the last of her litter, in the great darkness, and the heart of Lorkhaj was filled with the great darkness. And when he was born, the great darkness knew its name, and it was Namira. This is why I'm like, okay, so are they in the scuttling void? We don't know, and without more information, I don't know that we can really say. But Fadomai gives birth, and whatever the great darkness is enters Lorkhaj's heart. Like I said, we don't know what it is. Is it Oblivion? Is it Namira? Is it the pain of a broken family? Is it Anor's philosophy of zero sum? Is Deadite back? Because he's going to love this. He's back. Chris, you're going to love this. I'm going to say that this has to do with Carl Jung's idea of the shadow. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Now, Jung was talking about the shadow, and that's one of his archetypes of the personality. The three big ones are persona, self, and shadow. Look that stuff up. The great darkness becoming conscious and knowing itself as Namira could be what Jung calls shadow work, and that is facing the dark part of yourself, the parts of yourself that you wish you don't want to show the world. That's what the persona is. The persona is the mask to hide the parts of yourself you don't want anybody to see. And so the great darkness then could be, in a crazy metaphysical sense, shadow work. In Namira, and here's another idea, in Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, we see Namira taking care of the outcasts, the cannibals, the filthy, etc. It's that one, you go into the one ruin, and there's like this preternatural darkness that you really can't see very much, and she's got really freaky people are down there, and there are priests of the Nine Divines are trying to, I don't know, kill them or save them or who knows what. In any case, it strikes me that she's there taking care of the outcasts, and the theme seems to be that they should not try to change, that they should simply accept who they are, which is a very Khajiit philosophy. Fadomai and her children are outcasts from the place of the dance. They are victims of abuse, especially Fadomai. And as we will see, they are hunted by Anur in his anger. So this conscious darkness has entered Lorcaj's heart and will later affect how he creates the world.
So my question for you, Michael, is how does that relate to because if Lorcaj and Alkash are the parallels of Lorcan and Akatosh, and there's a clear connection between Akatosh and Lorcan, how does that whole the darkness enters Lorcaj's heart and becomes Namira, how does that factor into Alkash or Akatosh?
So the obvious answer, I think, is if we understand Alkash Akatosh as time and Namira as an embodiment of shadow work, then the connection is that the process of individuation takes time.
And we end up with Periite.
Right? It's all a machine, brother. It's all a machine. No, that the process of individuation and shadow work, etc., has to take place in the crucible of time. And there's this. When it comes to the Khajiit, you have to be careful with mixing metaphors because things get really. I mean, the Khajiit theology already can be kind of murky, but when you try to mix metaphors with others, it gets pretty really bizarre. But like, if you look in Coda, which we'll talk about probably later on, the whole idea that Akatosh is Lorcaj's heart.
Yep.
I forgot where I was going with that, but anyway, yeah. So it takes time to do the process.
So what you're saying is it's metaphors layered on top of metaphors.
It is.
Ad nauseum.
The trick, of course, is that in Tamriel, metaphors become reality.
Yeah.
And someday, man, I'm going to write a thing about mythopoesis, because when you have multiple people believing multiple different things, the metaphors, you know what they become? They become Celtic knotworks, and they all weave together and in and out of each other. And I'm not talking like just the little, these little like things that you get as a necklace or something. There are ones that have like dozens.
A rich tapestry.
It is a crazy tapestry of Celtic knots, and that's the Arbus, or at least that's Tamriel. And it can be really tricky to try and trace those knots, the lines, to see where they go. But it's all one knot. Okay. Let me get back to my notes. Okay, so okay, the death of Fadomai. So Fadomai gives birth to Lorcaj, and shortly thereafter he dies. As she is dying, Fadomai pronounces blessings on her children. She says, this is first to Joan and Jode, Jakajay. To you, Fadomai gives the lattice. For what is steadier than the phases of the moons? Your eternal motions will protect us from Anor's anger. We are going to have to spend some time to unpack that. And the moons left their place to take their place in the heavens, and Anor growled and shook the great darkness and could not cross the lattice. So Jakajay in ESO is the destination of the Khajiit. Okay, it's our place in all places. It's kind of this idea of finding your way in the world, individuation, that process. Here it is the moons and the cycles of the moons. Well, why would the lunar cycles protect from Anor? And my way of looking at this is that cycles are processes of eternal movement. They're so that you're never in a place of stasis, maybe in an overall sense because it's always cycling, but you're never quite the same. You're always changing in a state of perpetual motion. Now, later on, the Khajiit will be bound to the lattice, to this process of constant change. That in their many forms, they will also be a protection against Anor. Okay, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I kind of tied in the perpetual motion stuff with the water cycle almost, because it's important for Khajiit to remember, and Anisi says that several times over. And if we think to, again, just pulling the metaphor of Vivek's water face for a second, the idea of water being too busy to lie, it's the idea of water has that same kind of sense of stuff is always happening. But that's the only line I could really draw out from that.
So based on what you just said, James. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, sure.
But we've got the moons and the lattice, right? And you just connected that to water and movement and all that. So the lattice, I wonder if that has more to do with the tides than the moons themselves. So what we're looking at is the direction, the position of the tides maybe has more to do with the different breeds of Khajiit than the moons themselves do. So somehow the concentration of water in some way or another and the memories therein change the shape of the Khajiit.
Doesn't that sort of depend on the tide having an association with the moon?
Well, doesn't it?
It does in the real world.
I'm not sure that we do have that in the Elder Scrolls, though. I'm not sure we have that in Nirn, but
because that's been a thing that I've seen connections between Azura and Hermaeus Mora. Hermaeus Mora is the scryer of the tides of fate, and Azura is all about prophecy. And so when you link those two, Azura is the dawn and the dusk, and the moon and star. That creates a tentative link between the moons and the tides, I would say.
Oh, interesting. For who can say whether the moons predict the tides or the tides predict the moons?
Okay, so yes.
Yep.
I would say there's a connection, whether it's the exact same kind of connection that we have here in our world. I mean, who can say? But there's definitely you can connect the dots and end up with a connection between the tides and the moons.
So the lunar lattice is the movement of memory.
Yeah.
And there's actually, way back when I first started writing my crazy Khajiit Coda stuff, I had seen a study that had been done about cats, and they discovered that cats have tremendous facility for memory. And I guess they test stuff like this by putting them in a maze or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it would make sense to me that memory would be on some level very important to the Khajiit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I'll throw this one in. So one of the things that Fadomai says to both Nirn and Azura is she's going to give them her greatest gift. And she tells both of them this. Well, which one is it, man? And my kind of resolution of that is that both gifts are of equal value: bearing secrets, or bearing children, and having secrets. What happens of this is that Nirn thinks she's favored. That haha, Azura, too bad for you. But so is Azura. They're still both greatest gifts, and I see this as, with Fadomai being the archetypal clan mother, she tells both of them what they need to grow. They, for whatever reason, they've had this sibling rivalry. They both need to know that they're deeply loved. And if there's some deception in there, as we'll see, deception is part of the way the Khajiit have to do life. So this brings us to the crazy stuff of Fadomai's secrets. So Fadomai tells Azura 3 secrets, and they're told in 4 statements. The first is that Azura should take one of Nirn's peoples and change them into the Khajiit. And Fadomai said, the Khajiit must be the best climbers, for if Masser and Secunda fail, they must climb Khenarthi's breath and set the moons back in their courses, which sounds completely insane. What is that all about? Remember that Jode and Joan protect Fadomai's children and the planet Nirn against the rage of Anur, and if they fail, the Khajiit must set them right. The first secret, then, I think, is the first secret is used by Azura later to go past the moons, and that leads me to think that the first secret is the secret of void travel, which would be passage into the great darkness or shadow work. If nothing else, it certainly seems to have something to do with leaving Mundus, which we know the Khajiit can do. And Fadomai said the Khajiit must be the best deceivers, for they must always hide their nature from the children of Anur. Now that's interesting. We usually think of them as the children of Fadomai, but they are also the children of Anur. Maybe this means that they carry Anur's philosophy and rage within them. And the Khajiit are there to hold that rage at bay, but they have to do it in secret, lest the children figure out what they're doing and turn on them. Okay, next one. And Fadomai said the Khajiit must be the best survivors, for Nirn will be jealous and make Lorecast impossible. Oh wait, no. And she will make the sands harsh and the forests unforgiving, and the Khajiit will always be hungry and at war with Nirn. The jealousy of Nirn will make the world harsh for the Khajiit. And maybe Nirn is carrying some of Anur's philosophy in of her. We talked about that with the sibling rivalry. So it's not just that Lurkaj made the world a tough place, that Nirn and the other powers, continue to make it such. So the Khajiit have to be able to endure so that they can protect Nirn and her children. They become Nirn's secret defenders. And that, as we will see shortly, is connected to Moon Sugar. Thoughts?
I'm thinking there may be something about the moons that we're missing, or that a connection that we haven't made yet.
Okay.
That I'm gonna have to think a long time about.
Okay.
Well, one thing that makes me think about secret defenders related to the moons as a run, right? I just distracted for a second. If you think of a moon, like our moon, for example, the dark side of the moon is covered in all kinds of craters, more than we see on the side that faces us.
Yes.
Right? So the moon in that way is kind of like a shield.
Yes.
So the moons, and perhaps by association the Khajiit, are a shield of Nirn protecting them from outside influences. There's these meteors, if you will. So now I'm thinking about Bardal and the Ministry of Truth, a meteor thrown by Sheogorath at Vivek. But I don't know. I'm kind of making random associations here.
No, that's okay, and that again is part of that when we're mixing metaphors within the lattice work of the Celtic knot, and it can get really. If you trying to synthesize Khajiit philosophy or theology and Dunmer, God help you, it's. I don't know, Chris. You and I would have to work on that together. I think.
Yeah, I think the connection that Toshak is making in chat right now, Toshak possibly, about the moons are Khajiit lies trying to steal memory from Nirn. The more I think about it, the more I like the idea that the moons are lies in general.
Lie rock.
Hmm?
No, that
No.
Lorcan's corpse is a metaphor for lies. Its relationship to memory speaks to the unreliable nature of memory and truth. And something interpretation of Elder Scrolls.
Maybe.
I
Although I
don't
do
know.
feel obliged to flag here that the Khajiit don't associate Lorcage with the two main moons.
I know,
Right.
but literally everyone else does. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
There's a lot of. I got into an argument with somebody about that this week. The Khajiit do not see Joan and Jode as the corpse of Lorcan.
But
or Lorcage.
what I'm suggesting is that because the Khajiit associate the moons with a concept that Lorcan is philosophically associated with,
Right.
that they basically are doing the same thing.
Maybe.
Okay.
There's one of the guys in the lore community goes
Them
by
deceiving
the name
everyone
By
else,
Google
yeah.
and Soul. His real name's Jeremy. Really into physics, and okay, so there's a couple spots. If you look at the cosmology document that I believe was MK, and that's on Imperial Library. Just look up cosmology. It talks about the nature of time on the moons is weird, and it's kind of led us to say that Nirn and the moons, which form the Mundus, exist in a warp field bubble, or I'm going to mispronounce this terribly, an Alcubierre warp field. So that, and this, we can go pretty deep with this, that time really only exists, or I should put it this way, that Nirn or Mundus exists in a different time space than the rest of the Arbus. And that the moons are the barrier keeping the rest of that time space at bay.
Well, yeah, by time space you mean dimension.
Yeah.
And yeah. It absolutely does exist in a different dimension. The moons are keeping the dimension at bay might speak to the ability for Nirn to exist in unreality, which is the void, which makes sense because Lorcan's efforts were the things that created the possibility for Nirn to exist.
Right.
Sure, that adds up.
Yeah.
So, Mundus is a safe space. Anyway, no, moving on. Don't hate me, I had to. But no, in a sense it is.
I am so triggered right now.
A safe space for someone, not a safe space for Khajiit, generally.
No, yeah, no, not for the Khajiit. It's a place to be safe from Anwar and his anger. Okay, so Nirni needs a place to bear her children. So she goes to Lorcage and says, I need a place. But the heart of Lorcage was filled with a great darkness, and Lorcage tricked his siblings so that they were forced into this new place with Nirni. And many of Fadomai's children escaped and became the stars, and many of Fadomai's children died to make Nirni's path stable, and the survivors stayed and punished Lorcage. Okay, this raises a lot of questions. Forced into place. Now, does that mean that the children of Fadomai became a part of the world like Nirni? That there's some kind of like Gaia thing going on here? Does this relate to Ifre and the Earthbones? Maybe, probably.
I mean, it's obvious that this is convention that they're talking about.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and I only point that out for those who are watching who haven't made those connections yet.
Right.
So we've got convention here, and we've got the punishment of Lorcage or Lorcan or Shore or whichever moniker you want to apply to this parallel entity.
Shifty Pete.
You've got the Magna Gi, fleeing. What I'm noticing is an interesting lack of Magnus and the sun.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I guess kind of makes sense because the moons are so important to the Khajiit, and less so the sun.
Yeah.
If to make a real world comparison, the Western world has always operated on a solar calendar, whereas the Asia and the Eastern world has largely operated on a lunar calendar.
Right.
And so I mean, I'm wondering if it's a relationship like that. But I'm just spitballing. So
No, I'm with you. And one of I think that it's really interesting the way it says that they became the stars, and so that, in kind of our standard man and Murish kind of way of looking at things, it's that the Magna-Gi fled and they tore holes in oblivion, which allows the light of Aetherius to shine through. Is that what this means, or are they somehow suggesting that instead that the stars are not holes, but they're actual, like what we would think of as stars? I don't know. It seems a very weird way of putting it, but who knows? But the whole thing about making Nirn's path stable is definitely talking about the earth bones, and with the survivors staying and punishing Lorcaj. So far, this section is very similar to the Man and Mur mythoi.
Yep.
But the children of Fadomai tore out the heart of Lorcaj, okay, so far, and hid it deep within Nirn. And they said, "We curse you, noisy Lorcaj, to walk Nirn for many phases." But Nirn soon forgave Lorcaj, for Nirn could make children. Okay, in the Khajiit mythos, Lorcaj is on pilgrimage. That this eternal walking for many phases is punishment, but also, I would say, growth and transformation. You could view this as a kind of restorative justice theme. And if you're crazy like me, you will recognize that Maik the liar is actually Lorcaj on pilgrimage.
Oh.
You beat me to it. I was just about to say, so this means Maik is Lorcaj.
I 100% think that this is evidence that Mike the Liar is a Shezarene.
Oh no, I'm with you. Yeah, and we usually, when we talk about like that kind of thing with Lorcan and cycles and stuff, we're usually thinking of Shezarenes and that type of thing.
Yeah.
Maik is there's more going on there. I know that Maik says that he's just Maik is the son of Maik, who is the son of Maik. Yes, but Khajiit lie. Okay, we know your tricks, Lorcaj.
Yeah, but the question is Maik lying or was Maik lying?
Right. Which Maik is lying?
Yes, exactly.
I'll be done with this here, Jason.
So this section, though, has what I think is one of the most important things to understand Khajiit philosophy, and that is, why did Nirn forgive him? And what it tells us is because she could have children. And so I think if you're trying to understand the Khajiit, this is like the first of the really important ideas. Yes, the world is painful, but we may live, love, and have children. And you don't need more than this. These are the best things in life. We have our place and we have our dance.
Although, again, linking it with Dunmer stuff, what are children of the world, if you like? If a world
No. Well, we lost you for that whole thing.
Okay. Right. Okay, so thinking about Nirn as the world, yeah?
Yes.
You've got... What happens if a world has children? They're other worlds, right?
Depending on how you define world, yes.
Yeah. That was my thought, and I was thinking that kind of, again, linking it back to Dunmer stuff. It's my habit this evening, it seems. That Lorcan is called the Scarab, and the way I understand why that is that he created Nirn to be a dung ball from which his children, his larvae could then hatch and fly away. So it feels very, very similar to that Nirn is happy to exist now because they can because amaranths can happen, basically.
Right.
Is,
And
is
that
where
would
I'm going with
definitely be the done review.
Mm.
And to contrast that, the Khajiit view is you don't have to run away. You don't have to
Okay.
have other dreams because you have this amazing place to live. There are, granted, hot deserts, but they are absolutely gorgeous. There are the rainforests where moon sugar grows. There are these crazy cold places. Only strange humans go there.
Yeah.
It's, you don't need any place else. So that's kind of their perspective.
So
Now-
they.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Michael, but before you keep going,
Before I disturb the universe, yeah.
so would that mean that the Khajiit are at odds with the desires of Lorcan / Lorcage? Do you think? Because if Lorcan,
Yeah.
he failed at Kim so that others could see how not to do it. He wants people to elevate themselves and seek godhood or whatever it is, escape in some way. But the Khajiit are saying, no, you don't got to do that. You can just stay here, man. And
This place is cool. You just crash here. You can just
Yeah.
crash here.
Bro?
the rug really ties the room together.
Have some moon sugar. Yeah.
So that's okay. So that's kind of one thing that I kind of wanted to throw out there. But another observation I had is the whole bit about Nirn making children.
Yeah.
That reminds me of in the annotated Enuad. It talks about how as soon as time was established,
Yeah.
the Almafae were no longer immortal and had to procreate to continue surviving.
Right.
And so, I mean, that's the connection that I'm making there. Nirn could make children, as opposed to needing to make children. So,
Right.
the Khajiit have a really positive outlook on
very much so.
on a lot of things, and I think that puts them in squarely the Manish paradigm.
Yes.
So sorry, because Mundus is a gift, and this is a place for us to experience love and life and beauty and all these things, and the Khajiit seem to go right along with that. Yeah, this place is cool, man.
And so, to go back briefly, what you said about are they in opposition to Lorcage? Keep in mind that, at least from my perspective, and many people will differ, but from my perspective, the thing with Lorcage is that his heart is filled with a great darkness, which is the need for shadow work, right? Facing the shadow, which I could talk about that forever, but the will to run away is a will to run away from shadow work. I don't want to face my inner darkness.
To run away from the self, whereas the Khajiit are saying, no, turn around, face your demons.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Oh,
Felix is here.
Hello.
Felix.
Hello.
I'm afraid I can only be here for a little while. Today is turning into quite a crazy day because fuck my plans and my agreements. Everyone else needs me to be available at a last minute's notice. Am I right?
Isn't that the way it always is?
Yeah. So dropping in for a bit. Hi, what's up? Sorry I haven't been able to follow. So refresher, what are we talking about right now?
We're getting ready for me to disturb the universe.
So basically, Felix, we've gone through. It kind of looks like we're going step by step through the words of Clan Mother Anisi, and just kind of unpacking a lot of what that says, but just giving us a lot of insight on how the Khajiit view different paradigms and worldviews.
And Slovakian's asking something interesting in chat. There's a very big emphasis that we're getting right now in the words of the Clan Mother about making children.
Yes.
Is that literal?
It sure explains letters.
Yeah, I mean, I think keeping in mind that Nirn is a place where metaphors and myth become real, I think that then what is real can also become mythic. So when we're talking about having children, it could be literal. I mean, Khajiit do have litters, and from my experience, cat litters tend to be fairly numerous. But it could be, what I call progeneration. It could be music. It could be arts. It could be anything. The reproduction or the gifting of the dance, right? We talked about that love expands beyond the dancers to include everyone. So in that sense, children could be. I'm trying to think off the top. I can't think off the top of my head if we see any Khajiit married in ESO to non-Khajiit who have children.
Oh, surely, huh?
Be
Who have
way.
children?
I don't know if we have that. I know there's a couple where it's is it in Stone Falls? Where you have a Nord and a Dunmer, and he has his Nord children. But it'd be you get the idea where I'm saying here, that any kind of progeneration. Okay, so we come to the part, Amarar Toshak, this is for you. Khajiit and Mur. And she, Nirni, filled herself with children, but cried because her favorite children, the forest people, did not know their shape. Okay, forest people is the word, is the Elnofe. All right. Remember in Nirn that race is not okay. In Nirn, there's only one race, and that is Elnofe. Everyone is an Elnofe. The rocks are Elnofe who have subgradiated into something else. All right. There's no separate races like there are in our world. There's only one thing. Okay. So in Nirn, race, the individuated races as we see them, Khajiit, Red Guards, whatever, are ideologies worn as skin. Okay, and that's from We Ate It to Become It, the Sayasi creation myth, and a few other places. Mimic alteration, that type of thing. What we're seeing is that some Elnofe in the beginning existed without ideology, and we're shifting, or we're undifferentiated, or existing in unknowing. And Azora gave them an identity from Onisi. And Azora took some forest people who were torn between man and beast, not Mur, and she placed them in the best deserts and forests on Nirni. And Azora, in her wisdom, made them of many shapes, one for every purpose. We'll come back to that. And Azora named them Khajiit, and told them her second secret, and taught them the value of secrets. And Azora bound the new Khajiit to the lunar lattice, as is proper for Nirni's secret defenders. Then Azora spoke the third secret, and the moon shone down on the marshes, and their light became sugar. Okay, there is a lot to unpack there. The Khajiit were never a part of Aldmeris. Likely, neither were the Bosmer. Okay.
Yeah, I always assumed that by, beings who had forgotten their shapes, when I read that, I always figured it was Bosmer, but yours is a strong argument too. So
thank you.
Although the Bosmer do have their own argument that says they left around the time of Aldmeris, but
yeah, I really wish Jonathan was here because he's the Bosmer guy. But it seems that what we're dealing with is a group of Elnofe who had not chosen. Again, remember we said about how trying to systematize or synthesize with other systems is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Is this mean that you had a group of Elnofe who weren't taking part in the Elnofeic Wars? Maybe. I don't know. But whatever the case is, some of them were made into Khajiit. And those Elnofe were never a part of Aldmeris, which was an ideology that was taken as skin. And they were never a part of that. Okay? So Khajiit are not Mur. They were Elnofe. If anything, you see that it says that they were torn between man and beast. If anything, the Khajiit are closer to men because men accept creation. Mur reject creation. And as you can see, the Khajiit more than accept it. They embrace it. They absolutely love it.
Couldn't that just be interpreted as the pre-Green Pact Bosmer? No? Stuck between the shape of man, not necessarily literal man, and beast.
I would argue that we're talking about ideologies. So it's not so then there's an ideology that is man, which accepts creation, and beast. I'm not sure what to do with that exactly. I'm gonna have to think about that one. But that's what I think anyway.
Because personally, I would say that both interpretations are valid.
Sure.
There's an argument for why Khajiit could be Mer, and there's an argument as to why they could not be Mer. Both are equally valid because the language is so it's not concrete. It's almost vague and nebulous. We don't know.
Yeah. Plus, we have the Bosmer going through an additional stage of evolution before they become Bosmer. There's the forest people, and then the Boiche, and then they become Bosmer. So quite where the two split off is an interesting question as well. They've although in fairness, the Elden Tree does point out that the Boichi were the ones who most hearkened to Jeffrey, which is Yifa, which suggests that potentially they were split off before Boichi, but it's they're again they're both kind of set apart almost in terms of the Elderfey Wars, because they don't seem to have skin in the game at all, either race.
And I think, as kind of a sidebar, we have to recognize, and you guys have heard me go on and on about this ad nauseum, about the need for a third, that you have the mannish view of the universe, you have the marish view of the universe, but that's only two, and that there are other visions, which I call the beast people. I mean, Sayesi are not Mer. Amrare, I know that you're already typing this, that Sayesi are just men who have taken on a different shape. You may have something.
He's busy in an Elder Scrolls Online trial. Seriously, he is.
But you know, the Slode are not men or Mer. They are something completely different.
Yeah.
They're pure loathing. That's what they are.
Right. Exactly. Right. So I think that there is a third. And that would include the Khajiit and technically the Bosmer, but anyway, this is why I wanted Jonathan here, because he and we'll talk for hours about that stuff.
I would like to add a bit of a caveat in that even amongst elves and men, the view is not completely universal in terms of their outlook on life and existence thereof.
Right.
So it's not just, there's the Manishu and the Marishu and then the view of the beast folk. You have numerous different views within them. We have the Dunmer who left Aldmeris because their views were so heretical, seeing Daedra as good.
Right.
You have the men of Yokoda taking what's traditionally an elven worldview. And the elves of Yokoda, the Sinis Maris, or left-handed elves, however you choose to call them, they said, no, you know what? Actually, existence seems to be okay, at least if they're ideological opposites to each other.
Yeah.
And you have again the Slode having a different perspective, the Bosmer to a certain extent having a different perspective. So there's definitely more variety than just there's the Manish view, the Marish view, and then the need for a third, because there's more like 5 or 6 different viewpoints.
Yeah, when I say a need for a third, what I mean is not just those two, that there's more than that. But yeah, when you really break it down, there are a lot of different ways of looking at this subject. Whoa, I'm being attacked by a cat. No, I'm talking about you.
Appropriate.
Don't attack me.
Mm-hmm.
He's attacking me because he wants love.
Mm.
Okay.
If only we could have seen.
Cat logic.
It's back to Mehrunes Dagon.
He's a polydactyl, and he's a little over a year old, and he's absolutely adorable.
Oh God, under a year old? Oh, forget about it.
Oh, just over.
Oh, just over. Still,
maybe
not much better. Yeah.
Okay. So we
Trouble on legs.
talked about that. So I want to take a second to talk about moon sugar. Now,
Yay!
yay! Now I'm really going to get controversial. So many people believe that Joan and Jode are dead. We don't know, and I'm not clear on whether or not the Khajiit believe that Joan and Jode are dead. I haven't found anything, but maybe I haven't looked hard enough. Moon sugar, nonetheless, seems to be, it's called the crystallized light of the moon. And I would argue that this is the divinity of Joan and Jode shed upon Nirni and consumed by the Khajiit. Okay, so it's ostensibly it's a sugar cane that has been affected by moonlight, and it has these special alchemical properties. The Khajiit partake of this divinity, and I would argue that this is how they become the secret defenders. I would argue that this is similar to the Eastern Orthodox concept of theosis. Okay, and theosis has two parts. There is catharsis, purgation, the great darkness, shadow work, as we were talking about, and theoria, or illumination, and that's where moon sugar comes in. That this is the climbing upon each other to ascend to lofty heights. The imbibing of moon sugar allows them to climb Canarthi, entering the Great Darkness, and restore the moons, which ultimately allows them to protect from Anor's wrath. Let me pause there because I'm sure that's going to leave questions.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering whether there were any sorts of links to that, that are explicit links to climbing the moons and moon sugar anywhere. But there was also a kind of a note that was kind of that ESOs raised in terms of the Khajiit view on skooma, which is interesting that the Moon Bishop who talks about it in that particular Lawmaster's archive seems to view it very specifically as it's a corruption of the ritual more than anything else.
Yeah,
it's that it's a disruption of the pattern that goes through that's normally done through moon sugar, and so the ritual isn't fulfilling its role, which fits in really neatly with that sort of a view. If moon sugar is part of a Khajiit's sustenance and playing out a role as the defenders, if you can corrupt that supply, then you stop them from being Mundus's defenders.
exactly.
It becomes a theological and existential problem rather than just a social one.
Exactly. Yeah, it's in a sense you could almost call it anemic alteration. That it's a way of distorting the Khajiit in what they are intended to be. Yeah. There was something you said I wanted to. Okay, maybe not.
Is that related in some way to the
climate-
supposedly Altmer manipulation of the moons?
We're coming to that.
Okay.
When you asked about a link for climbing each other, that comes from the Return False thread.
Right.
For those of you who don't know, on the old Bethesda forums before Bethesda.net, there was a post called Return False, and I think it was Temple Zero who posted it.
Yeah.
And MK gave the nod and liked it, and it talks about the Khajiit climbing each other through the use of moon sugar to reach Secunda. And we'll come to that because the Khajiit have a lunar colony, and we will get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good times.
I found it on a link spam website. I will post it in the comments for now.
Good man.
So I don't know about. It's not going to show the author properly. It's going to be. Oh, it's someone called Flash. It's not some bizarre thing, but yes, that will lead you to it. Okay.
All right, excellent. It's a great piece, and it's a lot of fun. Definitely worth a read. Okay, and I do want to thank everybody. I know that I am ridiculous. There's so many. I have so many pages of notes. It's just I'm insane. And thank you for bearing with us and with me through all of this.
Not hardly bearing. Keep going.
We've been almost an hour and a half, and we've mostly just talked about the origins.
I know, it's insane. It's completely insane. We haven't even gotten to the Dromathra yet. Okay, so going back to Anissi, Ifr, who is Ifre or Jeffrey, follows Azura, learns the secret to pass the moons. She tells Nirni, hey, the Khajiit are Azura's people, so Nirni poisons the land for the Khajiit, just as Fadomai predicted. And she gives a people to Ifre, and that is the Bosmer. Ifr made the forest people elves and never beasts. which means that Ifr made them immutable, unlike the Khajiit, because the Khajiit have, multiple forms. What's fascinating to me about this, and again, I wish Jonathan was here, is that the Bosmer remember. And in ESO, throughout the Valenwood sequences, you see Bosmer struggling with the worship of Hircine and taking on a new way, which in this case would be werewolves.
Right.
So there is something going on there. Maybe it's that kind of that old Elnophaic thing of being undifferentiated. I don't know, and somehow for the Khajiit that is expressed and healed through having the many first stocks, but for the Bosmer it's kind of a struggle. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, here's sorry. Continue.
No, go ahead, please.
Well, here's a bit of an angle, just based on all the stuff that I'm hearing about, and I'm thinking about it on my own. The Elnafay, in old Elnafex, that's where we get the word chim or chime or whatever from, right? Which is the word of royalty, which gives you the power to change, everything. So it could change, your appearance, your history, the legends and stories told. He, reshaping the land that was once jungled. If this is the thing that comes from the Elnathan before they took on names and their new mimics, then could this infer to a certain extent that Azura having the power to change both the Khajiit and Ifr changing the Bosmer, and Azura also changing the Chimer into Dunmer, does this imply to some extent that Azura and maybe Ifr know Chim and use it?
Now we're speaking the same language. This is one of my
By the way, I really like that 30 seconds of awkward silence there. That felt fantastic.
Great. It's so good. It's so good. So I think we talked about that I am a co-director and writing lead department on Beyond Skyrim Elsewhere. Yep. This is a subject that absolutely fascinates me, and I actually have an entire quest line dedicated to Azura. And why is Azura with an H for the Khajiit different from Azura with no H in the Dunmer? What's the heck is going on there? And so I can't say too much. I don't want to, no spoilers.
Right.
It's a great question, and that idea of change and chim and all of those things. Oh yeah, maybe.
I would
maybe the magic word.
Magic word.
I would have a quick and swift answer saying no, simply because the Etada don't have much in the way of limits to go beyond, and so can't understand it. But that's just me.
Well, because see, I can understand that, and I thought about that. Right? Is the Etada are the necessary working parts, and that's why the men and the elves, you have to find new ways, walk at strange angles, take the enantiomorph, etc. There's all these different ways of transcending. Here's the thing: what if one of said Etada, especially one of the Daedra, their whole purpose within the scope was to know about it and to use it in order to facilitate a certain sense of destiny, whether they're aware of it or not. See, that's sort of where I'm also coming from on that end of maybe it's all a big giant, deep Arbic state conspiracy or something like that.
So
Daedrons can't melt Daedric steel.
Oh God! Can we spin any of the secrets? Because I think have we discussed all of the secrets of?
We did.
Okay, but I was going to say, could we think about any of those in the sense of being Chim or a walking way or something like that? I'm not.
Maybe. I mean, I haven't thought of that. I'd have to burn some brain juice to think about that, but maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. I was just wondering if that was part of it, but then we've got climbing, but climbing isn't exactly walking.
Right. That's different.
It's walking up.
Is that moving at strange angles?
It's
Mm.
ascending.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the
Okay.
ways to walk at strange angles is to ascend the Prolix Tower. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, you're all doing so well. I'm so proud.
We're all lore beards here. Come on, this ain't our first rodeo.
Don't you condescend to me, you son of a bitch.
No, it's ending up, man.
Ascending or walking at perpendicular to the ground. Yeah, that's a very strange angle. But this ain't a red card cast.
What are vampires to Khajiit?
Ooh.
Naughty bitey kittens.
Naughty buddy.
Yeah, naughty bitey. I like that. I really like that.
Well,
Naughty bitey
I mean,
kittens.
maybe we should be doing a vampire cast because there's actually quite a lot. If you read between the lines, there's a lot going on with vampires that they haven't really explored in ESO or any other game.
They haven't really decided
in-
what vampires are in TES as distinct
and-
from the general tropes.
Right, and why they function the way they do is the part that they haven't really talked about in ESO.
No.
But the Khajiit view on the Khajiit's worldview, I think, would go quite a ways to reinterpreting why vampires, get what they get done.
Yeah.
We've had the question of are vampire Khajiit. Well, hang on. What are vampire Khajiit to Khajiit? Do vampire Khajiit stop being Khajiit, or are they something else? Because we've had I can't remember the name of them. The I want to say Black Spiral Dancers, but that's another universe entirely. The Khajiit that fall under the influence of Locage's moon.
Mm-hmm.
The Dramathra, yeah.
Yeah. Would vampire Khajiit and other Khajiit affected through Daedra fall into that same conceptual space?
I don't know. There's the tricky part that vampires can only really exist in the light of the moons, not the light of Magnus.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would not be a negative thing. The blood thing is definitely weird. I don't know.
I don't want to turn this into a vampire cast, but
they
I think I
can
have
no
somewhere to go with that. Yeah.
They
Say
can
that
no
again,
longer
Chris.
eat.
Well, I think I have somewhere to go with the blood thing, but I don't want to turn this into a vampire cast. So
Okay.
My thought on the blood thing is that the Khajiit can no longer imbibe moon sugar.
That would be the problem. Yeah, it's definitely what the way I describe it. The phrase I use is that they've chosen to walk another way.
Yeah. Okay.
I want to say that there is a quest in ESO where there is a Khajiit vampire, but I don't remember the details. There isn't. I don't know that. People out there in Lorecast land, if you find any ESO books that deal with, or books or quest lines that deal with this, give me a message.
Noted.
I'm sure there's something in there, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. All right.
Well,
the last piece then, and then we're going to do a sum up of Khajiit philosophy. Thank God. And because Ifer had no appreciation for secrets, he shouted the first secret across the heavens, and with his last breath, so that all of Fadomai's children could cross the lattice. But Azura in her wisdom closed the ears of angry Onur and noisy Lorcage, so they alone did not hear the word. Okay, wait, what? Fadomai's children can pass the moons? Does that mean that they go into Oblivion or the Great Darkness? Does this mean that they're capable of doing shadow work? I don't know. We know that Azura closed the ears of Onur, so he could not enter, and therefore they could protect the Mundus from Onur's anger. And she closed the ears of Lorcage, so he could not leave because he's got stuff to do here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, in sum, Khajiit philosophy. So this is kind of where they're coming from. We are all one litter. All races, Aedra, Daedra, we're all one family. That family is troubled. But despite that trouble, we have our place. We do not have to escape the world. This is where we can live, love, and have children. To quote the Beatles, all you need is love. The enemy, yeah, I know, right? The enemy isn't the Daedra, but Anor's anger and the philosophy of zero sum, especially as it relates to love. It is not a philosophy well regarded by dichotomistic men and Mer. Ergo, the need for deception and the need for focusing on survival, and why they have to be the secret defenders of Nirni. Now, this is a very awesome and loving philosophy, but then why are there Khajiit bandits? Why are they violent? Those guys in Oblivion who come up to me every 5 seconds and be like, "Give me your money or I'll kill you." Why is there skooma? And I would say it's because the way is hard, and some become bent, like the Dromothra. But that is their way, and all must follow Jokajay in their own way. All must walk their own way. Yes, it will cause pain, sorrow, and regret, but we live, love, and have children. And if they are truly bent, Namira, or shadow work, helps them to straighten their tails.
Okay.
Oh.
Tune in the next time we can get one of these things scheduled where we're going to do literally everything else for Khajiit.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Can we do a follow-up to the Red Guard one as well? Because I got more stuff for
Oh,
that.
yeah. Yeah, no, we could do part 2s on a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But we just hit an hour and a half on the nose. So, as usual, we went a half an hour over time.
Let's just be an hour and a half.
I just started describing these as an hour and a half long.
It's pretty much might as well give up. Yeah, you're right. We might as well give up. So let's go a little bit over our standard length of an hour and a half then. Anybody got any questions, comments?
Not completely a question, but sort of something that I've noticed with the Khajiit and Azura's importance. She takes a very leader-like role, almost to the point as being a Magnus that actually stuck around and did the work. Because she's saying, "Oh wait, this idiot's telling secrets. Better cover the ears of Anur and Lorkaj because I know what they're going to be doing." Like they're taking charge and making sure things are happening because this is the way it has to be. So I need to make sure that's nice and tidy. I need to make sure this person doesn't know. And here's the lattice, and here's the moons, and okay, done and dusted. Everything's set. She's acting like a Magnus that didn't say, "Fuck this shit, I'm out."
Yeah.
Or a clan mother.
Yeah, exactly. Hey.
Well, it makes sense from what we know about the Daedra since they stuck around because they were fascinated by Nirn.
Right.
So that Azura is doing this stuff just sort of lines up properly with with her role as a Daedra, not an Aedra. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, though, in her own way, the way the Khajiit are describing her, Azura's behaving in a very non-Daedra-like manner.
Oh, very true.
She's influencing and changing these people and races and the setup, as it were, of Mundus and Nirn. So, but I know it's also not the same as actually like coming together to create it in the first place. So I understand she's still very much a Daedra, but in terms of how she's interacting and behaving with it, she's incredibly involved, at least according to the Khajiit, right? So it does make you wonder about what she has to gain from this, or perhaps why she's doing it.
A lot of people have been wondering that about Azura for a very long time. She's favored the mortal races so much more than most Daedra. Even the other Daedra that are considered to be good Daedra don't seem to spend that much time being as kind to mortals as Azura does, which just makes people, I think, a healthy level of paranoid, because why is she so much different? What does she have to gain? And it could be entirely that she just, that the Khajiit telling of Azura's origin, so to speak, is more accurate than most, and Azura just loves the races that she loves, and so her meddling around with affairs in Mundus is because she's trying to keep her favorites safe.
Maybe. I think we could also probably get into like a really deep Azura cast about really the nature of her of her sphere, which is dawn and dusk, and what that implies in like a metaphorical sense and whatnot. So
yeah, maybe she's not trying to
definitely
protect
a
people
lot
so
to
much
go
as
from
she's
there,
trying to
but
keep
we want
things
to keep
moving.
this on track. We can talk about Azura later.
I have similar feelings about Boethia, but that's fine. Yeah. All right. Well, if she thinks love will protect her from Big Brass, according to Coda, it did really not.
Well, hey,
we never actually got a published version of Dies
Irae.
Irae, but things do not work out well for Azura in Dies Irae.
No, they do not.
No.
She gets hollowed out, and Vivek lives in her. Basically, is the TLDR.
that's putting it incredibly mildly. Yeah.
Yeah. Or was that
Did we
Boethia?
cross from Disarray to the trial of Vivek?
No, it's Dies Irae was. I mean, it got the project got canceled because I think Kirkbride, if I recall correctly, he sort of stepped back, looked at it, and went, "Oh, this is way too grim." And he's like, "This is not a story that I can hand out to people because this is just there's nothing constructive here. Basically, it's just depressing and awful." And
I like depressing and awful.
well,
Well, yeah, and you love the slow. So I mean, you know.
The thing about what MK tries to put out is that he tries to put out product that has a message, and Dies Irae didn't really have a message that he liked, I guess. I don't really want to speak much more than that because I'm not him, and I don't have a hell of a lot of data on that. So
It'd be great to have a podcast where we could get like some developers and people involved with, especially some of the older games like Kirkbride, Kuhlman, and just ask them some questions like, "Hey, so what was it like working there? What did you mean by this? Or is this an interpretation that you can jive with?" Like, it'd be nice to get some answers.
I think from Kuhlman, the majority of the answers you're going to get is sure, whatever works for you.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because Kurt doesn't really, I mean, Kurt and Kirkbride don't really want to weigh in too heavy on a lot of things. They like watching the conversations.
Which I understand and respect, but it still would be fun to just, get someone from the old times and just ask them a bit about, what it was like or how certain things came to be, right? And the developmental process behind them. It'd be great to do something a little bit different.
That's if we could get Lady Nerevar on that. She and I both have a really a deep fascination for postmortems on games, and then just the history of the development of a game, of just talking about how like what got made first, what conversations were had when you guys were talking about this feature, this system, and so on, and what other options did you have, and why did you go with this one, and etc. And a lot of the reasons why some developers don't like talking about those is because they don't like. One of the reasons that I've heard that developers don't like doing postmortems is because they don't like to talk about something that the fans then go, "Oh shit, this game would have been a million times better than this." Than it is if they had this feature, and then the other reason why they don't like to talk about it is because 9 times out of 10 it's not included because they ran out of time or money, and that's just
true.
That's kind of hard. That's a hard pill, and then sometimes they just straight up didn't occur to them, which hindsight is 20/20, and it's sort of and plus, I mean, as anybody will say on any who's ever worked on a long time development project. There's always a laundry list of stuff you wish you'd done, and it hurts depending on how passionate you are about the project. It can hurt quite a bit to talk about the stuff you didn't get to do. So anyway, on that not very wonderful note, let's agree that we need to do another one of these. Michael, we'll schedule around your schedule as usual.
We need a part 2.
And I'll hope like hell that my job doesn't F that up. And
it's just nerdy.
Yeah. No, there's plenty more. Don't lie to people. So I want to thank everybody for showing up today. LVM, thanks very much for continuing your sub. And for those of you who haven't joined yet, the fastest way to find out when we're going to be on is to join our Discord server, which is the link for which is in the channel description below. And I can't think of anything else. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. Wave bye-bye.
Thanks, friends.
Bye.
I'm waving bye-bye even though I don't have the camera on. You'll just have to believe me.